The Carathian defense fleet hung in space like dying embers, their once proud vessels now scarred and listing. Admiral Zextar watched through the bridge viewport as another of his ships exploded in a brilliant flash, torn apart by the relentless, void-born assault. His mandibles clicked in frustration as he counted the remaining vessels under his command. 12 ships. That was all that remained of the mighty Third Defensive Fleet that had numbered over 300 vessels just 6 months ago. "Sir, the Harmony's Light is requesting permission to fall back to the inner perimeter," reported Communications Officer Nelthy, her voice trembling despite her attempts to maintain military composure. The young Carathian's scales had turned a pale blue, a clear sign of terror that she couldn't hide. Zextar's primary eyes focused on the tactical display, while his secondary eyes continued watching the battle outside. The void-born ships moved like living shadows, their organic hulls pulsing with an otherworldly energy that seemed to drain the very light from space around them. They had appeared 6 months ago at the edge of Galactic Council space, emerging from the dark void between galaxies with a hunger that consumed everything in their path. "Permission denied," Zextar replied, his voice steady despite the hopelessness of their situation. "All ships maintain position. We hold the line here." The bridge fell silent, except for the constant hum of failing systems and the distant rumble of weapons fire. Every being present knew what holding the line meant. Behind them lay the core worlds of the Galactic Council, home to trillions of sentient beings from dozens of species. The Vekthari crystal cities, the Mordan ocean worlds, the peaceful trading stations of the Epsilon Collective. If this final defense line fell, there would be nothing between the Voidborn and the heart of galactic civilization. "Admiral," came the voice of Tactical Officer Grimthak, a massive corvette whose rocky hide bore the scars of countless battles. "Long-range sensors are detecting another Voidborn wave approaching. Estimate 300 vessels, including what appears to be a new class we haven't encountered before." Zextar closed all 4 of his eyes briefly, seeking the inner calm that had carried him through 40 years of military service. 300 fresh enemy ships against his 12 battered vessels. The mathematics were cruel and absolute. Even if every shot found its mark, even if every torpedo struck true, they couldn't possibly stop such a force. "Time to contact?" he asked. 17 minutes, sir." 17 minutes. Zextar opened his eyes and looked around the bridge at his crew. These beings had served with honor and distinction, following orders even when those orders led to certain death. They deserved to know the truth. "Open a fleet-wide channel," he commanded. Nelthy's fingers danced across her console. "Channel open, sir." "Warriors of the Third Defensive Fleet," Zextar began, his voice carrying across the communication network to every remaining ship. "You have served with honor that will be remembered for generations. Our stand here has given the core worlds time to evacuate billions of civilians. We have bought time for the research stations to continue seeking a weapon that might stop the Voidborn. We have upheld our oaths to protect those who cannot protect themselves." He paused, watching as another explosion lit up space in the distance. The destroyer Cosmic Pride had taken a direct hit from a void-born bioweapon. Its hull, dissolving like acid, had been poured across its surface. "In 17 minutes, we face our final battle. We are outnumbered 25 to 1. Our ships are damaged, our ammunition running low, our energy reserves nearly depleted. By every logical calculation, we cannot win." Another pause as he gathered his thoughts. "But we can still matter. Every Voidborn ship we destroy is one less that reaches the core worlds. Every minute we delay them is another minute for evacuations to continue. We may fall today, but we fall as warriors." Across the fleet, acknowledgments came back. Some were formal military responses, Others were simple expressions of determination in dozens of different languages. The Zephyrian fighter pilots sang their death songs, hauntingly beautiful melodies that echoed through the comm channels. The stoic granite lords of Morketh simply stated their readiness to die with honor. "Admiral," Grimthak's deep voice cut through the moment. "I'm detecting massive energy signatures from the Voidborn formation. They're charging their reality disruptor weapons." Zextar nodded grimly. He had seen those weapons in action before. They didn't just destroy ships. They unraveled the very fabric of space-time, leaving wounds in reality that took years to heal. Entire star systems had been rendered uninhabitable by prolonged Voidborn assault. "All ships, prepare for final engagement. Maximum spread formation, focus fire on the larger vessels. Make every shot count." The Voidborn ships emerged from their approach vector like a tide of darkness. Their hulls seemed to absorb light itself, creating distortions in space that hurt to look at directly. The larger vessels pulsed with veins of sickly green energy, while smaller attack craft swarmed around them like parasites. "Range in 30 seconds, reported Nelthie, her voice now steady with resigned determination. "All weapons, prepare to fire on my command," Zextar ordered. "Target the lead biocruiser." The seconds stretched like hours. Zextar found himself thinking of his clutch siblings back on Karathia Prime, wondering if they had managed to reach the evacuation ships in time. He thought of the great libraries of Vekthar, with their crystalline data matrices containing the collected knowledge of 1,000 civilizations. All of it would be lost if the Voidborn weren't stopped. "Range achieved, sir. All ships, open fire." The remnants of the 3rd Defensive Fleet erupted in coordinated fury. Plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, and graviton beams lanced out across space, striking the lead Voidborn vessels. For a moment, hope flickered as several enemy ships staggered under the concentrated assault, their organic hulls cracking and bleeding strange fluids into the vacuum. But the Voidborn response was swift and terrible. Reality itself seemed to bend as their weapons discharged, and space warped around the Galactic Council ships. The frigate Stellar Dawn simply ceased to exist, not destroyed but edited out of reality, as if it had never been there at all. The heavy cruiser Valiant stand lasted 3 seconds longer before its hull began to phase in and out of existence, the crew's death screams cutting off abruptly as they shifted into dimensions where sound couldn't travel. "We've lost 4 ships in the first exchange," Grimthak reported, his massive hands gripping his console so tightly that the metal began to buckle. "The Voidborn are targeting our engines. They want to capture us alive." The thought sent chills through every being on the bridge. Captured crews weren't killed cleanly. They were absorbed into the Voidborn bioships, their consciousness preserved in endless torment as their bodies became part of the enemy fleet. It was a fate worse than death, and every warrior in the fleet knew it. "Continue firing," Zextar commanded. "We don't surrender to these things. Ever." The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. One by one, the ships of the 3rd Defensive Fleet were overwhelmed. The Harmony's light managed to take down 2 Voidborn fighters before a reality disruptor carved it in half. The Carathian Dreadnought Ancestral Honor held out the longest, its thick armor, plating, and redundant systems, allowing it to absorb punishment that would have vaporized smaller ships. But even it eventually succumbed to the relentless assault. Soon, only Zextar's flagship remained, the heavy cruiser Eternal Vigil. Her hull was breached in 17 places, life support was failing, and the main weapons array had been destroyed in the last exchange. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the bridge as the crew struggled to keep basic systems online. "Sir, we're being hailed by the Voidborn," Nelthie reported, her voice barely a whisper. "Ignore them," Zextar replied immediately. He had no intention of listening to whatever horror they wanted to communicate. Instead, he turned to his tactical officer. Grimthok, status on the reactor core? The massive Corvette understood immediately. Containment systems are damaged, sir. If we overload the core, the explosion should take out at least 6 of their ships. Do it. As Grimthak began the overload sequence, Nelthy suddenly straightened at her station. Admiral, I'm detecting multiple hyperspace signatures. Something's approaching fast from Vector 77 Mark IV. More Voidborn? Zextar asked, though he couldn't imagine what difference it would make at this point. No, sir. The signatures are different. I'm reading quantum wake patterns I've never seen before. Whatever's coming, it's big. The space around them suddenly erupted in brilliant flashes of light as dozens of ships dropped out of hyperspace. But these weren't the organic monstrosities of the Voidborn. These vessels were angular and purposeful, built from gleaming metal and ceramic composites. Their hulls bore markings that none of the Galactic Council races recognized, symbols that seemed to speak of efficiency and determination. Unknown vessels. This is Admiral Zextar of the Galactic Council 3rd Defensive Fleet, he transmitted, hope beginning to kindle in his chest despite himself. Identify yourselves. The response came back in accented but understandable Galactic Standard. Admiral Zextar, this is Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Expeditionary Force. We received your distress signals. Sorry we're late to the party. Terran. Zextar's mind raced as he accessed his memory files. Terra, also known as Earth, was listed in the Galactic Council databases as a primitive world in the Outer Rim, inhabited by a species that had barely achieved interstellar travel. Their initial contact with Council scouts had been cordial but limited, and they had been classified as a developing civilization that might be ready for full membership in another few centuries. Admiral Chen, Zextar responded, this is a Voidborn fleet. They have weapons that can unmake reality itself. I strongly advise you to withdraw immediately while you still can. Negative, Admiral. We didn't come this far to run away. All ships. This is Chen. You see those ugly organic bastards? Light them up. What happened next would become the stuff of legend in the annals of galactic history. The human ships moved with a precision and coordination that seemed almost supernatural. Their weapons were unlike anything in the Council's arsenal, hurling projectiles at significant fractions of light speed, while simultaneously deploying energy beams that cut through Voidborn hulls like they were made of paper. The lead human vessel, a massive dreadnought that dwarfed even the largest Council ships, fired what could only be described as a miniature star. The weapon struck the primary Voidborn biocruiser and simply erased it from existence, leaving nothing but superheated plasma where a ship the size of a small moon had been moments before. Admiral Zextar, came Admiral Chen's voice again, recommend you cancel that reactor overload. We've got this. Grimthak looked at his commander with all 4 eyes wide in amazement. Sir, should I abort the sequence? Zextar watched in stunned silence as the human fleet tore through the Voidborn formation like a blade through silk. Ships that had seemed invincible moments before were being systematically destroyed by weapons and tactics that defied everything he thought he knew about space combat. Yes, he managed to whisper. Abort the overload. The tide of battle had turned in seconds, and the hunters had suddenly become the hunted. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the TES Indomitable, watching the tactical display with the calm focus of someone who had spent 30 years fighting humanity's wars. Around her, the bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency, their movements precise and economical. No wasted motion, no unnecessary chatter. This was how humans fought, and it was terrifying to behold. Ma'am, the Voidborn are attempting to regroup, reported Commander Marcus Webb, her tactical officer. The man's scarred face bore testament to battles fought in the outer colonies against pirates and worse things that lurked in the dark between stars. They're trying to form a defensive sphere around their command vessel. Chen nodded, her fingers dancing across the command interface built into her captain's chair. Real-time data flowed directly into her neural implants, giving her a god's-eye view of the battlefield that no alien admiral could match. Every human ship, every weapon system, every crew member was connected through the quantum communication network that allowed them to fight as a single organism. Signal the Prometheus and the Defiance. Have them execute a pincer movement on the Voidborn left flank. The Retribution and her escort group will punch through their center. I want that command ship isolated and destroyed before it can call for reinforcements. Yes, ma'am, Webb replied, his fingers already transmitting the orders through the fleet network. Chen allowed herself a small smile as she watched the human ships move into position. The Terran Expeditionary Force wasn't humanity's largest fleet, but it was their most advanced. Every vessel had been built using technologies that the Galactic Council couldn't even imagine, weapons and defenses that pushed the boundaries of what physics would allow. The Voidborn had made one critical error in their assessment of threats. They had focused entirely on the established powers of the Galactic Council, dismissing humanity as another primitive species barely worth noticing. They had no idea that while the Council races had grown comfortable and complacent, humanity had spent the last 2 centuries preparing for war. Admiral Chen, came a transmission from the damaged Carathian flagship. This is Admiral Zextar. I must ask, how did you develop weapons capable of harming the Voidborn? Our most advanced technology barely scratched their hulls. Chen touched her communication panel, opening a direct channel to the alien admiral. She could hear the awe and confusion in his voice, and she understood it. From his perspective, a miracle had just occurred. Admiral Zextar, humanity learned long ago that the universe is not a friendly place. We've been preparing for threats like the Voidborn since we first reached the stars. Sometimes being paranoid pays off. What she didn't mention was the true extent of humanity's preparations. The bunker worlds hidden in asteroid fields, the weapon research stations built in the void between galaxies, the automated factories that had been churning out warships for decades in anticipation of exactly this kind of threat. Humanity had looked at the peaceful Galactic Council and seen a civilization that had forgotten how to fight for survival. Incoming transmission from the Voidborn command ship, reported Communications Officer Lieutenant Sarah Park. They're attempting to establish contact. Put it through, Chen ordered. She was curious to hear what these things had to say. The voice that came through the speakers was wrong in every way that mattered. It sounded like multiple voices speaking in unison, harmonizing in frequencies that made the human crew unconsciously uncomfortable. When it spoke, the words seemed to bypass the ears and go straight into the listener's mind. Unknown vessels, you interfere with the harvest. Withdraw now and your species will be granted a swift ending when we reach your worlds. Chen's expression didn't change, but every human on the bridge felt a chill at the casual threat. These things weren't just invaders. They were predators who saw entire civilizations as nothing more than food to be consumed. Voidborn command ship, Chen replied, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never backed down from a threat. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Expeditionary Force. You are in violation of Galactic Council space and have committed acts of genocide against multiple civilizations. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. The response was immediate and filled with something that might have been amusement. You are primitive creatures playing with forces beyond your understanding. We have consumed civilizations older than your species. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your minds cannot comprehend us. Submit to the harvest. You know what? Chen said, turning to her tactical officer. I'm tired of listening to this thing. Commander Webb, target the command ship's central mass. Full spread, all tubes. Gladly, ma'am. The Indomitable shuddered as every torpedo tube fired simultaneously, sending a wave of destruction toward the Voidborn command vessel. But these weren't ordinary torpedoes. Each one contained a quantum destabilizer warhead, designed to disrupt the exotic matter that the Voidborn used to bend reality to their will. The weapons struck the enemy ship in a synchronized pattern that had been calculated by the fleet's AI systems to maximize damage. Where they hit, the organic hull didn't just explode, it ceased to function on a quantum level, the alien technology becoming inert matter that drifted away in chunks. Direct hits across the target's port section, Webb reported with satisfaction. Hull breach confirmed. They're venting atmosphere in what looks like, I'm not sure what that fluid is, but there's a lot of it. Around the battlefield, the rest of the human fleet was systematically dismantling the Voidborn formation. The destroyer group, led by Captain Maria Santos, had cornered 3 enemy fighters and was methodically reducing them to component atoms with their particle cannons. The heavy cruiser Retribution had punched through the center of the Voidborn line and was now engaging their rear guard with devastating effectiveness. But the Voidborn weren't going down without a fight. As their command ship began to list, it discharged its reality disruptor weapons in a desperate attempt to take some of the human ships with it. Space twisted and buckled around the weapons' impact points, but the human vessels weathered the assault with minimal damage. How are we surviving those reality distortion attacks? Admiral Zextar's voice came through the comm again, filled with amazement. I've seen those weapons unmake entire squadrons. Chen glanced at the quantum shielding indicators on her display. The technology was still classified, but the alien admiral had earned the right to know something of the truth. Quantum synchronized deflector shields, she replied. We've learned how to reinforce the local reality around our ships. It takes enormous amounts of power, but it works. What she didn't explain was how humanity had developed such technology. The research had cost them 2 colonies and nearly 1 billion lives when early experiments had gone wrong, tearing holes in space-time that had taken decades to repair. But every loss had taught them something new. Every failure had brought them closer to understanding how to fight enemies that could manipulate reality itself. Admiral, Lieutenant Park reported, we're receiving multiple distress signals from across Council space. It looks like this wasn't the only Voidborn attack. They've hit 17 different systems simultaneously. Chen felt her jaw tighten. A coordinated assault on this scale meant that the Voidborn had been planning this invasion for longer than anyone had realized, but it also meant that thousands of ships and trillions of beings were under attack right now, and the human fleet was probably the only force in the galaxy capable of stopping them. Get me a direct link to Earth Command, she ordered. Maximum priority, quantum encryption. The connection took several seconds to establish, the signal bouncing through a series of relay stations hidden throughout human space. When the link stabilized, the weathered face of Fleet Admiral James Harrison appeared on the main screen. The old man looked like he hadn't slept in days, which was probably accurate. Sarah, Harrison said without preamble, please tell me you have good news. We've stopped the attack at the Korathian defense line, Chen reported, but the Voidborn have hit 17 other systems simultaneously. This is a full-scale invasion, sir. Harrison's expression grew even grimmer. We've been monitoring the attacks through our deep space sensor network. It's worse than you think. Intelligence estimates that the Voidborn have committed over 50,000 ships to this assault. They're not just raiding this time. They're here to stay. Chen felt a chill run down her spine. 50,000 ships was more than the entire combined fleet strength of the Galactic Council. If those numbers were accurate, then this single human fleet might be the only thing standing between the Voidborn and the complete conquest of galactic civilization. Sir, I'm requesting immediate reinforcement. We can't cover 17 systems with one fleet, no matter how advanced our ships are. Already in motion, Harrison replied. I'm deploying the 2nd, 5th, and 7th fleets to assist, but it will take them 6 hours minimum to reach the affected systems, even pushing maximum hyperspace velocities. You're going to have to hold the line until then. 6 hours. Chen looked at the tactical display, where the remnants of the Voidborn attack force were still fighting desperately against her ships. Her fleet could handle this group, but if similar forces were attacking 16 other systems simultaneously— "Understood, sir. We'll do what we can." "Sarah," Harrison's voice carried a weight that spoke of difficult decisions made in desperate times. "I'm authorizing the use of Prometheus-class weapons if the situation becomes untenable. I know the risks, but if we lose the Council worlds, we lose any chance of building a unified defense against the Voidborn." Chen nodded grimly. The Prometheus weapons were humanity's deepest secret, planet killers that could sterilize entire star systems if necessary. They had been built in the hope that they would never be used, but sometimes hope wasn't enough. "Copy that, sir." Prometheus authorization confirmed. The connection ended, leaving Chen alone with the weight of command and the knowledge that humanity had just committed itself to a war that would determine the fate of the galaxy. Around her, the bridge crew continued their work with the quiet professionalism that had made the human fleet legendary, but she could see the tension in their movements. "Ma'am," Webb reported, "the Voidborn command ship is attempting to disengage. It's heading for the edge of the system at maximum acceleration." Chen studied the tactical display. The command ship was wounded but not dead, and if it escaped, it would carry intelligence about human capabilities back to the main Voidborn fleet. That information could be used to develop countermeasures, to find ways around humanity's technological advantages. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. Do not allow that command vessel to escape. Maximum pursuit speed, all weapons free." The chase that followed would be remembered as one of the most dramatic running battles in galactic history. The wounded Voidborn ship fled through the outer system while the human fleet pursued relentlessly, exchanging fire with the enemy's rear guard. Ships from both sides were lost in the engagement, but humanity's superior technology and tactics gradually wore down the Voidborn resistance. In the end, it was the destroyer TES Vengeance that delivered the killing blow, her captain managing to get close enough to the command ship to deploy a full spread of quantum torpedoes directly into its central mass. The explosion that followed lit up the system's outer edge like a small sun, and when the light faded, nothing remained of the Voidborn command vessel but expanding debris. "All Voidborn ships in this system have been destroyed or disabled," Webb reported with satisfaction. "The immediate threat has been neutralized." Chen allowed herself a moment of relief before turning her attention to the larger strategic picture. One battle was won, but the war was just beginning. "Signal Admiral Zextar," she ordered. "Tell him we need to discuss coordination with any remaining Council forces and get me real-time intelligence on the other attacks. We have work to do." As the human fleet regrouped and prepared for the next phase of the battle, Admiral Zextar found himself staring at the tactical display in amazement. In less than an hour, the humans had accomplished what the entire Third Defensive Fleet couldn't do in 6 months of fighting. They had not just defeated the Voidborn, they had made it look easy. But perhaps most importantly, they had given the galaxy hope. For the first time since the Voidborn had emerged from the void, someone had proven that these invaders could be beaten. The question now was whether humanity could extend that victory across 17 star systems before the Galactic Council collapsed entirely. The real war was about to begin. Admiral Chen stood before the holographic display in the Joint Command Center, watching as real-time reports filtered in from across the 17 embattled star systems. The massive chamber aboard the Carathian space station, Unity's Hope, buzzed with activity as representatives from dozens of species worked alongside human officers to coordinate the largest military operation in galactic history. 3 weeks had passed since that first desperate battle, and the scope of the Voidborn invasion had become clear. Intelligence reports indicated that the enemy had committed nearly 100,000 ships to their assault, emerging from the dark void between galaxies in waves that seemed endless. They hadn't just come to raid or conquer specific worlds. They had come to consume, the entire galaxy. "Admiral," reported Commander Lisa Zhang, her intelligence officer who had been promoted to the Joint Command Staff. "We've received confirmation from the Vec-Thari system. The 12th Fleet has successfully repelled the Voidborn attack, but at heavy cost. Captain Rodriguez reports 60% casualties among the defending forces." Chen nodded grimly. The mathematics of the war were brutal and unforgiving. Even with humanity's technological advantages, every victory came at a price. The Voidborn fought with the desperation of a species that knew only consumption and destruction, throwing themselves against human defenses with no regard for losses. "Status of the evacuation efforts?" she asked. "Proceeding ahead of schedule," replied Admiral Zextar, who had become her closest liaison with the Council forces. The Carathian officer had recovered from his wounds and thrown himself into the coordination effort with an energy that bordered on obsession. "The civilian transports from the Mordan colonies have cleared the danger zone. We're looking at successful evacuation of nearly 200 billion civilians so far. 200 billion lives saved." Chen allowed herself a moment of satisfaction before returning her attention to the tactical situation. Saving lives was only part of the challenge. They also had to find a way to stop the Voidborn advance permanently. "Any word from the research teams?" she asked Dr. Elena Vasquez, the human xenobiologist who had been studying captured Voidborn technology. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her datapad, her expression a mixture of excitement and concern. "We've made significant progress in understanding their biotechnology. The Voidborn ships aren't just vessels. They're living organisms that have been engineered for specific functions. The smaller fighters are essentially spaceborne predators, while the larger ships are more like mobile ecosystems." She gestured to a display showing the internal structure of a captured Voidborn fighter. "But here's the interesting part. All of these organisms are connected through what we can only describe as a quantum neural network. They're not just coordinating their attacks. They're sharing consciousness across their entire fleet." Chen frowned as she studied the data. "Are you saying there's some kind of hive mind?" "More complex than that," Dr. Vasquez replied. "Individual Voidborn organisms retain their own consciousness, but they're also part of a larger collective awareness. It's like they exist simultaneously as individuals and as components of a greater being." The implications were staggering. It explained how the Voidborn could coordinate attacks across multiple star systems with perfect timing. It also suggested that defeating them would require more than just destroying their ships. They would need to find a way to disrupt the quantum network that connected them. "Doctor," Admiral Zextar interjected, "have you been able to determine where this network originates? If we could locate their central command structure." "That's the problem," Dr. Vasquez said, shaking her head. "The network doesn't appear to have a single central node. It's more like a distributed consciousness that spans their entire species. Disrupting it would require simultaneous attacks on multiple targets across a vast area." Chen felt a chill as the full scope of the challenge became clear. They weren't just fighting an invasion fleet. They were battling an entire civilization that had turned itself into a weapon of consumption. Every Voidborn ship destroyed was like cutting off a finger from a giant hand. Painful, but not ultimately decisive. "Admiral Chen," came a voice from the communication station. "We're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. Admiral Harrison requests immediate conference." "Put him through," Chen ordered. The holographic display shifted to show Admiral Harrison's face, and Chen could immediately see that the old man had aged years in the past 3 weeks. Dark circles surrounded his eyes, and his usually immaculate uniform showed signs of hasty dressing. "Sarah," Harrison began without preamble, "I need to brief you on Project Lazarus. The situation has reached the point where we may need to implement our final contingency." Chen felt her blood run cold. Project Lazarus was humanity's ultimate weapon, a technology so dangerous that its very existence was known to fewer than a dozen people in the entire human government. She had hoped it would never be necessary to discuss it, much less use it. "Sir," she said carefully, aware that alien ears were listening, "perhaps we should discuss this through secure channels." "Negative," Harrison replied. "The situation has progressed beyond the need for secrecy. Admiral Zextar, Dr. Vasquez, I'm authorizing them for Lazarus briefing. We're going to need all the help we can get." Chen exchanged glances with her alien colleagues, seeing confusion and concern in their expressions. Whatever Project Lazarus was, it was clearly something that humanity had kept hidden from their newfound allies. "Project Lazarus," Harrison continued, "is based on technology we recovered from a derelict ship we found drifting in the void 50 years ago. The vessel belonged to a species called the Architects, and it contained information about ancient weapons designed to fight entities like the Voidborn." Dr. Vasquez leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her caution. "What kind of weapons?" "Reality bombs," Harrison replied bluntly. "Devices that can unravel the quantum fabric of space-time itself across vast areas. The architects used them to create what they called null zones, regions of space where exotic matter cannot exist and quantum networks cannot function. The implications hit Chen like a physical blow. A weapon that could disrupt quantum networks would effectively lobotomize the void-born collective consciousness, but it would also render entire star systems uninhabitable for any form of advanced technology. "Sir," she said slowly, "the collateral damage from such weapons would be enormous. We're talking about sacrificing entire sectors of space." "I'm aware of the costs," Harrison replied grimly. "But our latest intelligence indicates that the Voidborn are massing a second wave. Over 300,000 ships, including vessels the size of small moons. If that force reaches Council space, no amount of conventional warfare will stop them." Admiral Zextar spoke up, his voice carefully controlled. "Admiral Harrison, how long have humans possessed this technology?" "We've been studying it for 5 decades, Harrison admitted, "but we've never tested it on this scale. The theoretical models suggest it would work, but you don't know for certain," Zextar finished. "You're asking us to gamble the existence of entire civilizations on untested technology." Chen could hear the accusation in the alien admiral's voice, and she couldn't blame him. From the Galactic Council's perspective, humanity had hidden the existence of potentially war-winning weapons while allowing millions to die in conventional battles. "Admiral Zextar," she said, "if we had known about the Voidborn's true capabilities, we would have shared this information earlier. But these weapons are as dangerous to us as they are to the enemy. Using them is essentially admitting that we've failed to find any other solution." The debate that followed was intense but brief. Reports continued to flow in from the front lines, each one painting a grimmer picture of the strategic situation. The Voidborn were learning to counter human tactics, adapting their bioships to resist quantum weapons. Worse, they had begun targeting civilian evacuation routes, making it clear that their goal was complete extermination rather than conquest. Finally, Dr. Vasquez spoke up. "There might be another option," she said hesitantly. "Based on our analysis of the Voidborn neural network, I think we might be able to turn their greatest strength against them." Chen turned to the scientist. "Explain." "The quantum network that connects all Voidborn organisms is incredibly sophisticated, but it's also vulnerable to certain types of interference. If we could introduce a quantum virus into their system, something that would propagate through their network and disrupt their ability to coordinate—" "You're talking about a cyber weapon," Admiral Zextar said with growing excitement. "Something that attacks their consciousness rather than their physical forms." "Exactly. And the beauty of it is that we already have the delivery system." Dr. Vasquez gestured to the display showing captured Voidborn technology. "These bioships we've captured are still connected to their network through dormant quantum links. If we could reactivate those links and use them to introduce our virus—" Chen felt hope stirring for the first time in days. A quantum virus would be far more precise than reality bombs, capable of targeting only the void-born network while leaving conventional technology unaffected. But the technical challenges would be enormous. "How long would you need to develop such a weapon?" she asked. "With the combined resources of human and council science teams?" Dr. Vasquez considered the question carefully. "Maybe 72 hours. But we'd need to keep the Void-born occupied while we work. If they suspect what we're doing, they might sever the quantum links to prevent infection." Admiral Harrison's voice cut through the discussion. "Sarah, the second Void-born wave will reach Council space in 96 hours. If this virus plan doesn't work, we'll have no choice but to deploy the reality bombs." Chen looked around the command center at the faces of humans and aliens working together to save their civilizations. The weight of command had never felt heavier, but she knew there was no choice. "Do it," she ordered. "All available scientific resources are to be dedicated to developing the quantum virus. Admiral Zextar, I need you to coordinate with the Council fleets to keep the Voidborn engaged while we work. We have to sell them the illusion that we're fighting a conventional campaign." The next 72 hours passed in a blur of desperate activity. Human and alien scientists worked side by side in laboratories that had been hastily established aboard the Unity's Hope Station. Meanwhile, the combined fleet conducted hit-and-run attacks against void-born formations, drawing their attention away from the research efforts. Chen found herself existing on stimulants and determination, catching brief naps in her command chair between crisis responses. The Voidborn were pressing their attacks with increasing intensity, as if they sensed that something important was happening beyond their ability to perceive. On the third day, Dr. Vasquez finally appeared in the command center with exhaustion written across her face and triumph gleaming in her eyes. "It's ready," she announced simply. The quantum virus, when activated, would spread through the Void-born network like wildfire, disrupting their ability to coordinate while leaving their individual organisms confused and disoriented. It wouldn't kill them immediately, but it would render them vulnerable to conventional weapons and prevent them from mounting coordinated attacks. "Deployment requires that we get one of the infected bioships within quantum transmission range of a major Void-born formation," Dr. Vasquez explained. "The virus will then propagate through their network to every connected organism within approximately 50 light-years. Chen studied the tactical display showing the approaching second wave. The Void-born fleet was massive beyond comprehension, a dark tide of bioships that would consume everything in its path. But they were traveling in a tight formation that would make them perfect targets for the virus. "I'll take the infected ship in personally," Chen declared. "The Indomitable can get close enough to deploy the weapon." "Admiral," Admiral Zextar protested, "that's essentially a suicide mission. The chances of survival are irrelevant," Chen cut him off. "This is the only shot we have. If the virus doesn't work, then nothing else will matter anyway." 6 hours later, Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable as it approached the edge of void-born space. Behind her, the infected bioship hung in the cargo bay like a cancer waiting to be released. Ahead, sensors showed the massive enemy formation moving inexorably toward Council space. "Range to target formation in 30 seconds, reported Commander Webb. "All hands, prepare for virus deployment," Chen announced over the ship-wide communication system. "Today we find out whether the galaxy has a future or not." The Indomitable closed to within transmission range and released the infected bioship. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the quantum sensors registered a massive cascade of disruption spreading through the void-born network like a wave of electronic death. Across 50 light-years of space, hundreds of thousands of void-born ships suddenly lost their coordination. The vast fleet that had been moving in perfect formation dissolved into chaos as individual bioships found themselves cut off from the collective consciousness that had guided them for millennia. "Admiral, Webb reported with amazement in his voice. "It's working! The Voidborn formations are breaking apart. They're attacking each other." Chen watched the tactical display as the tide of war turned in humanity's favor. The quantum virus had done more than just disrupt Voidborn coordination. It had driven them into a frenzy of confusion that made them turn on each other. Without the guiding influence of their collective consciousness, they had reverted to the basic predatory instincts that lay at the core of their nature. The galaxy was saved, but at a cost that would be measured in generations. The Voidborn threat was ended. But the knowledge of what lay in the dark between galaxies would forever change how the civilized species viewed their place in the universe. They had learned that survival required not just wisdom and cooperation, but the willingness to fight with everything they had when faced with extinction. And they had learned that sometimes, when no help seemed possible, humans would emerge from the void to stand against the darkness.